Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Unlock and Learn number 15, where we talk about, data and all the fun things in the vacation rental industry. I'm excited today to be joined by Key Data Dashboards, Jennifer, who is our account manager and also an industry friend. We are, hot off of the Data and Revenue Management Conference. Jennifer just got back from, but data never sleeps, right? So we asked Jennifer to continue her data talk as she does every day. So, introduce yourself to us.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I am excited because I just love a chit chat with you anyways. So, yeah, I'm the director of client success at Key Data, and I've been here for almost 6 years now, which is kind of crazy. And so it's been really fun just kind of seeing not only the evolution of like the customers at Key Data, but also the evolution of data in our industry over that time frame. Like a lot has changed. Like 6 years ago, I don't know, time has kind of lost all essence, right? Like post-COVID, like it doesn't exist anymore. Like time is everything feels like 5 years ago at this point. Um, but yeah, so it's this is probably my dream job, to be honest with you, Talia. Like I love
You are
working.
literally living the dream.
Yeah, I never thought that this would be my gig. I did revenue management in the industry for a long time, with our current CEO, Jason Sprinkle, at his former rental company. And so now being on this side, it's the education with customers and getting them to like see an aha moment within their data is incredibly rewarding for me personally. So, yeah, it's been an adventure though for the last 6 years,
Yeah.
I would say.
I
Mhm.
love it. And I would say the last 6 years feel like 10 years, right? Which doesn't work
But
because
also doesn't,
but
right?
doesn't, because I had
Yeah,
a 4-year-old in 2020, right? When COVID happened. He's about to be 5, right? So that can't
wild.
be 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's
We're
crazy.
talking about data, and the math is not mathing
It's
in
not.
time.
No.
And the reason we got here, right? Like, I mean, clearly, I love to bring on industry people and talk about things that are relevant right now.
Hmm.
But Hosteeva, we have a partnership with Key Data where it powers our pricing tool and our software, but also we really we work with revenue management. Our revenue management teams work with Jennifer and even our marketing teams and sales teams like myself. And so recently we kind of been digging into how could we use it in my perspective is very different from when you were my account manager, maybe at Rented, right? When we
Yeah.
were doing revenue management. And now it's how do we actually split it between our departments and talk to them? So we named this, leveraging our metrics, making data work for every department, the language of metrics, right?
Mhm.
So that's, we're kind of like setting the scene, right? Why
Yeah.
does the data matter? And why does it matter to certain individuals? And we can keep it at top level.
Yeah, and that's really the evolution of the data over probably longer than I've been at Key Data, honestly. But like most of the metrics that we talk about, right, like your occupancy, your ADR, RevPAR, booking window, those tend to be really revenue management heavy metrics, right? And I think for the longest time, the idea was that like nobody else needs those, just your revenue managers, right? Like
Don't
that's
share with anybody else.
yeah, and like revenue managers are living and dying by those KPIs, and other teams within a rental company have metrics that they're driven by. But I think what's been really interesting and what this topic kind of is how those same KPIs have been incorporated into other departments or like resources within a vacation rental business. So, when you talk about revenue per available rental night, which is like nobody used to know that KPI, not ever, most people know that KPI. Like it's the value of your night that you're selling. And so massively big topic these days is owner retention
Mhm.
post-COVID. It is really challenging. That KPI is so important to know how to communicate to your homeowners on your program because If not, they get hyper fixated on that price or the calendar, and they tie your revenue manager's
Or the
hands behind their
occupancy
back.
or the ADR.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember one of the, and this is kind of even basic, right? But one of the main
Mhm.
things we used to always hear whenever we did revenue management too, and we had to talk with the owners, was like, the owner's mad because they are expecting an occupancy of 90%. But what was their ADR? And let's tell the people, what's the
Yeah.
formula for RevPAR, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's you gotta find your groove with that KPI, I have found. Like everybody has a different way to talk about it. My CEO Jason has a an analogy about a lemonade stand. And like for me, I'm like, I don't get it that way. Like I don't understand it when he puts it in that way. But some people, I have a customer who uses donuts as how she explains it to her owners. Like for me personally, if you're using occupancy and average daily rate to measure your success, right? Like whether it's how full your calendars are or where your rates are at, it's a question of like, how do I know things are working at certain times of the year? It is your ADR times your occupancy. In key data, occupancy is adjusted, so we're only looking at the nights available.
Yes.
We
So
remove the
important.
owner nights and blocks. Yep. Like why judge myself on nights I can't actually sell? And then average daily rate is just a division of your revenue with your guest nights. And so you can think of it in terms of multiplication. I am not a multiplication galley myself. I love a division personally because I can visualize that easier in my head. So if I think about the revenue portion of the average daily rate and the nights available portion of the occupancy, if I were to take all my revenue I have and spread it out across every single night that I have available, what is the value of the night I'm selling? That's how I personally explain it to customers and visualize it in my head for, especially on a homeowner level, it's easier to even paint
Right.
that picture on a single unit as opposed to like a whole company, which is a little more challenging to get your head around that much data.
It's a beautiful metric. It really
It
is, right?
is.
And it's tying it
Mhm.
all together. And we used to, I was talking, this is as an account manager, I was going through some things on how to get account management dashboard set up. And I was like, how did I do this in different companies? And had an aha moment yesterday. I was like,
Yeah.
I used key data, right?
Mhm.
So it was like odd how this kind of all went together. But we used to always go year over year RevPAR, right? And so when we take that to value, right? It's not saying, hey, your occupancy's up year over year, your ADR is up a year. But hey, yeah, last year the value of this night was $400. This
Mhm.
year the
Yep.
value of this night is $500. That can tie you more to your ROI, understanding, are you getting more bookings and a
Mhm.
higher rate, right? It tells you a story.
It does. I feel like occupancy is a pretty solid storyteller by itself,
Mhm.
right? Like you can get a decent picture of what's happening. Average daily rate is way less stable. Like the
Yep,
further out you go, the more really dependent it is on what is booked at that point. But
exactly.
when you mush the two together, you get that RevPAR number, which is that kind of like, here's how the story, like it's like your arc, right, of your story. And so like that occupancy and average daily rate, like homeowners especially get so fixated on those two things. And sometimes your rate can be lower. You can drive more occupancy and you can make that $500 versus that $400 that way, dependent on the time of the year. So I think those metrics too, like I personally find that business development and like acquisition phase of things that gets left out of the conversation more than it should. If we're going to talk homeowner retention, which you and I talked about recently, like it starts with acquisition, right? When you bring that homeowner on and you're setting the bar of expectation on how your revenue team or how you are going to drive revenue and what
Mhm.
levers you have to pull. And so it's the same, right, with like marketing. I know you and I spent a lot of time talking about that. Like that is a solid dance between your revenue management strategy
Mhm.
and marketing. Marketing is kind of elusive for me because I never did it. I
Mhm.
always worked with my marketing team in revenue management, but there's so many other silos they're focused on in a rental business. It's easy to miss that opportunity of knowing those KPIs and helping biz dev
Mhm.
drive those numbers and revenue teams drive those numbers.
I really like that. And if we backed into like say like so that we have a good flow, right? And let me see if I can make it here. So like
Yeah,
RevPAR to like marketing. Let's see if I
sure.
can make the flow there, right? So if you're looking at the value of the night in a certain area, right? And if you know
Hmm.
things and you use things like key data dashboard and it tells you where your travelers are coming from, right?
Hmm.
Then you can then say, okay, our values of our nights are up and here. We want to spend more money here because we actually have a higher ROI and
Sure.
maybe less operational costs. Not no, you don't know, right? Maybe
Yeah.
ROI, RevPARs are occupant. Maybe you're debating something operationally for your team. Then your
Yeah.
marketing team goes at builds a beautiful build direct book direct campaign, whether they're emailing or they're social media paid ad tagging travelers in those certain areas to bring back to you. That is smart, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
data driven workflow and concepts from cross-functional teams. And
Hmm.
there's tons of ways you can do it, but it's always, I would say, like recently I do marketing for like we're a software and I dabble a little on our traveler side, but we do have someone for that. But they always ask the question like, you can't just go into blank space. Like where do you need to
What am
go?
I dropping in? Yeah. Yeah.
Let the data of how your properties are performing, and which properties are performing best, and the
Hmm.
demographic of who actually is traveling to who's coming to those properties, like basically trigger your marketing campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to add to that, because that I love that. I think what additionally is interesting for marketing teams that kind of drops into revenue management, but also not, is like your consumer behavior KPIs, like your average length of stay and your booking
Mhm.
window KPIs, right? Like, when do I do this marketing campaign?
I feel like your
And
booking window just like made like it was like a
uh-huh,
highlight in my mind, right? Like
yeah.
when are they booking? When should I be reaching out to people? This is like content calendar planning gold.
Absolutely. Like you can get ahead of it if you know some of that and you like in key data, you can look historically, you can also look forward, right? And so if you know over the last few years, historically, when your shoulder season, certain times in your peak season tend to rent, you can kind of plan that, like you said, content schedule out a little
Hmm.
bit, but you still have to be agile. It's not always a revenue management issue, right? It's not always a price issue. Sometimes it's a demand issue
Hmm.
and that requires that
Understand.
marketing drive. And so also with changes in like macroeconomic stuff with like consumers, it's not that they're not traveling, like demand's pretty solid everywhere. It's just that the way they're traveling is a little bit different. And
Hmm.
so you might see a shrink in the number of nights, right? And so your revenue team has to plan for that and how to accommodate better RevPAR through less nights. But as well as marketing, how can I drive some
Hmm.
additional nights where we're not getting them, right? So I love, we talk about storytelling KPIs. I think a really good storyteller is occupancy with your booking window because it
Hmm.
will tell you, if you've got less occupancy than you did this time last year for Christmas, and your booking window is further out this year, you're not getting the volume in a longer period of time than you were able to do last year in a shorter
Hmm.
period, right? Your consumer is telling you something. So maybe that's my revenue manager needs to look at the rates and say like, ooh, rates are too high compared to last year. But if
Hmm.
they're not, right? And you're like, I've been strategizing for like 90 days on this or 180 days, it might be a demand issue and driving more interest to that time period might help with a special or, whatever your strategy is. But yeah, I love booking window and occupancy
Yeah.
together. Hmm.
Right. It's driving interest to the area, right?
Yep.
What revenue management is so many things. And it took me working for a revenue management and data company and building a tool to even know that, like, I worked at Verbo for 7 years in listing optimization. That was revenue management, right?
Yeah.
While we were not legally allowed to advise on rates at that
Yeah.
time, right? Listing optimization and everything was there and what you needed to do. And back to the marketing before we kind of like pivot from there, right? I think there's
Sure.
some great individuals out there that have leveraged, like saying, hey, we need to bring more traffic to our area by looking at their data, understanding. They're not saying, hey, the revenue manager is not doing their job or, oh man, we aren't doing good. They're looking at the market, they're understanding
Yep.
what the trends are going, and they're doing things, I think what Travis Wilburn years ago in Stay
Mm.
Charlottesville, right, created like a festival over there. People always finding
Yeah.
reasons to, travel to their areas, creating, I think there's a lot of people, I want to say, Tyann and, Missouri, they do really good at decorating their properties around the holidays and making sure
Oh,
they're
yeah, that's great.
changing their photos and bringing
Mhm.
people in for the season. Hey, it's probably a slower time. It's the holiday, but
Yeah.
don't want to decorate, want to go on a family trip, come here, right? So
Mhm.
you think about it in a different way. I'd like to kind of talk about, because I feel like we glossed over owner retention, where that is
That's
just such a huge, I don't think we glossed over it. I think it was like a point we were in, and now we're at a good point to pivot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I wanted to say sales, but how does this work for not sales? It's more account management and owner retention. Maybe your sales and account management may be the same person. I do know in property management, it's common to sell a homeowner and they stay with you for a time. And everyone has different. I'm not saying what's right or
Yeah.
wrong,
Yeah. I
but
think,
how can reading
like,
the data help you to prepare your owners for this? And
yeah.
you and to point out before we go in this, you and I have been in this prior to COVID, during COVID, and
Yeah.
after, right? There was a time in June of 2020 where you could have done whatever you wanted as a
Yeah.
revenue manager, right? And it was beautiful. Everything was glorious.
Yeah.
Numbers were astronomical. It was just, there was a boom. It was like June
Yeah.
2020 when everything opened up again. That's not the way it is now. That doesn't mean we're not doing bad, right? But how
Yep.
talk about that, and how should an account manager or that owner relations team be using the data to prepare
Mhm.
themselves, be proactive, not reactive?
Exactly. That's the challenge, right? Is especially if you're managing like a book of business of certain count of homeowners or something, it can be really hard. Or if you're wearing all the hats in your company and you're fielding all the owner calls, it can be hard to sit down and be proactive.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing about our new platform is you can add up to 4 date ranges in a lot of the graphs, particularly the market data graphs, like your benchmarking report. And I think what I've seen a lot of our customers doing this year in the product is a couple of different things from a retention perspective, which is for those owners who maybe came on during the unicorn years of COVID, where like you could do no wrong in your occupancy and your average daily rates.
I thought I was a good revenue manager at some point. COVID gave
We
me,
all looked
I was like,
so good.
and it was like, no, I think this is just because no matter what you do, it works.
People were going to do it, right? Like consumers were going to take it. So for those owners, especially, like they don't know what life is like, what's normal. And I think whether you're bringing homeowners on or you're in like a retention role where you're trying to keep owners or both, I think it's a matter of trying to get them to understand what the market conditions are, right? By helping them know what they have been previously before. And I think we get insight in our key data and our pricing tools, like we kind of, and we live in the market, we know what's going on in our markets, but our owners don't know when they purchase a home. Talk to a real estate agent who's like, everything's great. Like, you'll make your money on this, no problem. They don't
Mm-hmm.
understand like that may be like a lag of like 6 months before they're on your rental program. What are the market conditions and what have they been? So I think that's kind of setting that framework with your owners. I think in the acquisition phase, again, using occupancy and RevPAR and a little less of like, here's what your rate will be, here's the revenue we're anticipating by season. I think less of that and more of a range of performance on first year, second year, it gives you more flexibility in the long run for that retention phase.
Mhm. I
I
think a lot of people say that, like, it's be more direct, be more
mhm.
upfront. I don't think that people are intentionally not being direct. Like you're
No,
like I can do better than this person. And a lot of people do have that data that say that they do when they
sure.
get numbers, right? But even if you take out like what we do, what we're doing, if you buy a house or you buy
Mhm.
something new at any point in time, somebody sold that to you. And a house is
Yeah.
a pretty aggressive sell. And you're in a honeymoon phase. It
Mhm.
is your job as a salesperson or an account manager to build that relationship and ease them through what the next phase is going to be. They're going to have a natural transition of emotions, regardless if the realtor gave them right projections or not.
Right.
Right? They
Right.
building this dream in their head of what this is going to look like. And even if it's not a new one, like we do still have a, supply. there's still a lot of sales going on where we see
Yeah.
supply is changing hands quite a bit. Also, that's part of the prices being so high at some point in COVID, and the numbers not hitting that
Yeah. Yeah.
everywhere. But let those numbers help you again tell that story from them in the beginning, right? And
Yeah.
I
So if you put those numbers in front of them in the beginning, right, they get more comfortable, more familiar. There's more trust building around the fact that you're being driven, like you're not just pulling numbers out of nowhere for rates or, what your strategy is. Like the more you put those numbers in front of your owners, the more comfortable they'll start to get, which is where metrics and key data can help too on the retention side, which is you can send your owners reports on their individual properties like once a quarter or once a month, once a
Mhm.
year. But I've seen a significant increase of property managers doing quarterly and twice a year or monthly newsletters to their homeowners. Some of them are like segmenting their owners into like high touch, medium touch, low touch owners, or things you would do in like a SaaS company or like a tech side of things, right?
Mhm.
Like you usually have metrics like that you're trying to drive with how your users use your
Mhm.
platform. It's same with your owners, right? Create a profile for them. Who are they? How do they like to be communicated with? Especially if
Mhm.
you're working with them from beginning to retention, you can kind of build some of that up for yourself to know like, okay, this kind of newsletter with these KPIs that are a little more basic, like they don't really care about the
Mhm.
numbers overly. I'm going to kick this out to them. And my more advanced owners who really need that, you know, trust in the metrics, I'm going to send them a different one, something to kind of just consistently
Mhm.
put conversation out on what are you doing with your cleans and what events are going on in the market. And here's what's happening with performance overall for certain inventory in the market. That just can, I used to be very opposed to that in the rental industry when I was in
Mhm.
there. Like, I was like, I'm not going to open the door for my owners to ask things that they
But
don't
but
need to
on the other
know.
side of it, right?
Massive
Mhm.
difference. It's so helpful to have that transparency from the jump and just
Right.
consistently be in front of
And you
them on
you
it.
choose what that transparency is, right? Yes, it's
Mhm.
your business, but what can you give them? And you could, and this is where some people are like, yeah, I don't want the owners in this, right? Well, take yourself, put yourself in the owner's shoes, or just
Yeah.
take it out of this. Like, what if you were just the owner of a business and you had a whole bunch of people selling for you, trying to make you revenue off of something, and nobody was giving you any numbers, just
Yeah.
saying, hey, no, here's the paycheck. We're just
Yeah.
doing it.
Everything's cool.
Everything's
Everything's
fine.
good. Yep.
That's essentially how an owner feels. And so you can create
Yeah.
that. I really also love that way of you saying, like put them in different segments, right? Some
Yeah.
owners need higher touch points than others. And I remember, in my account management days, like it was
Mhm.
very common, like, whether it was home away or rented, right? You could have, hundreds of accounts. And there was 20 that maybe I talked to weekly, right? We had a
Yeah.
weekly one-on-one. It was warranted. It needed to be done. We needed to review data and take things. Some of them, they got a quarterly KDD report, and these people never talk to me. And even if I called to say, I want to tell you about a price increase, like not even
Yeah.
a fun thing to tell people, did not answer the phone, right?
Yeah.
And so, did I still care about those people? Yes, I looked at the reports. I made sure they were doing well, right? And
Mhm.
ironically, usually those ones who don't respond to you are doing fine. If they
Yeah.
weren't, then you find different ways, of getting, but it really does, the process is not going to be the same for every customer. And that's
Mhm.
why there is so much data and why there's so much cable. Let companies like Key Data say, okay, this is how it's going to work this is how each of my teams are going to use it. And this is
Mhm.
how we're going to use it to talk to our owners and how we're going
Yeah.
to use it to talk to our leaders.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the flow needs to go. And then you make it work for yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, like your rental projections matter, right? I mean, we kind of touched on that a minute ago, but like a plug key data again, like we have a rental projection tool.
Love the rental projection tool and Key Data. I think
Too.
have always been like such a huge anxiety of mine for years, and Key Data has
A
100%
lot.
helped that.
Yeah, and here's the deal. I don't think we are at a point or will be in a long time in our space. This is just my opinion on a tool being able to tell you like this is the number that property is going to do. Period. There's too many variables in a vacation rental. And so there is still some sort of level of human input that has to go into them, your knowledge of your market, some of the nuance in your market or unit types or neighborhoods. But we give you a place to jump off, and it's using that direct source market
Mhm.
data, not scrape data, right? So it is helpful in saying like, okay, you still have to put a little work into your projection, but we're at least saying like, this is the range of revenue performance in a historical year for that comp of properties we're pulling
Mhm.
direct data for. And so it makes the process a little faster, but it also gives you those KPIs that are
Good.
important to put in front of your owners. Yeah. And that you can then set goals around for your sales team or like your reservations team and your revenue team on what numbers we're trying to meet on these new properties.
I love that. And I really love that point. Everyone should say, projections, no one has the secret sauce to coming up with a projection, right? It's just not there. It is very important to understand source versus scrape data. And I wanted to make sure we said that, key data provides you real data of actual numbers. We're taking out, any owner holds, any pay, any of those maintenance things. It's actual paid occupancy and information that's in there. We're not any cleaning fee, none of that's really in
Yeah.
there, right? So it's
Mhm.
giving you more of a true data. Where scrape data, where you might get that from some other companies, right? It's not that it's not bad data, but
There's
it's
a use for
a
it.
little bit convoluted, right?
Yeah.
In projections world, I did lease arbitrage for a little bit, so we always had to be a little like, I'm not good at just giving people like just a number projection. If somebody asks me, they're gonna have a sheet and you're gonna have a range, right? I might have gotten something I came to from Key Data and maybe AirDNA together or a hotel one because we work in a lot of hotels. And then I look up what is the percentage range for the market, and there's usually a low end that's 25% less or 40% less and a high end that's 10 to 25, depending on what the market sees.
Mhm.
That takes a little bit of work on me. Can I do that in like 30 minutes? Yeah, but it means a lot to me. I don't want to give someone a prediction. Here, you're going to get 57K. And I just got that from a tool and I have nothing else I could give them because demand shifts and we don't really have control over that.
That's right. And you're trying, I mean, there's nothing wrong with pumping out projections like that. If that's your gig, totes go for it. I mean, depending on the market you're in, right,
Yeah.
too. But I think that that is hurtful for you later on as you gain that mass and you get these owners on and you not put as much into that rental
Right.
projection. I have been there. I worked in a market in the Florida Panhandle, heavily saturated with property managers, massively saturated with real estate agents who are shopping the property
I
managers for
know.
the best projection, right? Like such a struggle. And you get like, I love salespeople so much, but like sometimes you're going for that big fish and you will put what you can out there. And then your revenue manager gets the projection and they're like,
Yeah.
I can't
Right.
do that. Like, I
And
need
that's why, like,
like,
yeah.
okay.
Like you be realistic with the projection. And I would tell you owners appreciate it. Whether it's an owner of a hotel of 103 units, talked to a guy yesterday,
Right.
or it's somebody who has one, when we go and we say like, hey, like, this is what you're saying you want, this is why the projection is it is a little lower than what you thought. And this is why we think they really appreciate it because those owners are usually the ones who are coming from another property manager.
I was just gonna say the same thing.
They're
Yeah,
not
like
buying a new property. They know what's been going on. They know a little bit more and they can kind of see through the fluff.
yeah, absolutely. Especially these owners who've been on since 2020, 2021. They're trying to find somebody who's gonna hit them those numbers again or whatever, right? I think trust in the data and in the numbers you're putting in front of owners and existing homeowners is gonna go a really long way these days with expectations not being the same as what you were getting in prior years
Yeah.
during the unicorn years.
Do you think we're going to see a year sometime when somebody's like, hey, I want data and just exclude 2020 and 2021? Like,
I mean, most of my clients I work with are like, they'll go back that far for like how nights available has
but they don't
increased in the
really need, I
market.
mean, now it feels like it's so far. Like, I'm like, technically, I'm not looking at data from then in either, right? Because it's 4 years,
Not for a
5 years ago.
projection.
No,
Absolutely not.
not at all. And I've seen recently, I would say like this year, like consistently, it felt like projections were going down, right? Like year
Yeah,
over
more
year.
stable.
And now we're going up again. Like it was more stable and not by much, right? But, and just you say like, I might pull projection for one property month over month, just because it's a long deal, right? So we're going over it. It's a really interesting thing to see, like, and that
Yeah.
shows you the seasonality and the change in the year. And just what's going on in the
Yeah.
world and how that can change traveler patterns.
Mhm.
It's so many things in there. But
Yeah.
we have gone through this so fast. It's been
I
30
know.
minutes and we've talked about so much. So thank you for our attendees who have listened to us. Jennifer, is there anything that I miss or that we want to leave anybody with?
Let's say like a 2025 things to do in the new year, right? Because like we're
Yeah.
rounding out the year here, which is shocking, by the way.
Oh, how?
I know like December is basically over at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been so challenging the last few years, right? With steady data year to year and that kind of thing. And I feel strongly that your 2024 data in your key data account, like, is pretty solid to stand on looking forward at 2025. I think we'll see similar trends. Don't think you're going to see like massive differences in like occupancy and revenue and those types of things. I think
We're
it's
at a
going to be
place where it's
similar.
leveled out a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we're a little more stabilized. Like the numbers have really come together.
Knock on some wood,
And
Jennifer.
uh,
Knock on wood.
as things are right now, like I won't say any of like the what Mother Nature words or like anything that can affect change there. But I do think you've got some solid ground to stand on. I think last year, 23 was also a little more solid towards the middle back end of the year, but
Mhm.
it is so incredibly important that even as a leader, owner of a rental business, you should know the numbers in your account and help your teams drive those numbers like we talked about today. It's not just a revenue management KPI that you might be looking at. It is for multiple teams across your business. And if you as an owner or leader can support those numbers, understand them, and know how they're being used across your teams, it is going to overall better support everybody who is operating with that data in your company as well. So
I love
I
that.
love,
And,
yeah.
I would say for as someone who, has specifically used our partnership with Key Data to help us strategize as leaders, use your partners, right? If you were a key data partner, that's absolutely amazing, right? You look this, you call your account manager right now and you go through,
Yes.
you have an action list, right? We'll put it in a blog, questions for you to ask them, right? Right there. But hey, I have this data. Or your revenue manager, whoever is let's call the data nerd of the person in your life, whether it's your key
Yes.
data person or it's your revenue manager. Ask
Yeah.
your data nerd to help you strategize how to use that data and take action and watch the sparkle in their eyes light up and then
So
utilize
true.
it.
It's so true. It is a sparkle for sure. And you do, like, if you're a key data user, you have a client success manager, we break our team up into territories. So they're working your region, your markets with all the professional managers who use key data in your market. They're a great resource and to lean on that. And if you're not using a data tool like key data, it's it's still going to be challenging knowing what's going on and knowing your strategy. And so get some data into your business if you don't already have it.
Get data
Mhm.
and read the data. Like
Yeah.
if you're like, I am not reading the data, where is this data or data? I'm sorry, what data?
Data.
What are
I'm a
we?
data gal. Yeah, I
Data.
think we are on the data
We're
stand
on the
here.
data here. If you're like, where is it? Find it, right?
Yeah.
Go into your PMS system, ask your account manager, go and, like find
Mhm.
the data and start letting it tell you a story. Find that
Let us
story.
help you. Like we've got pre-built dashboards in the new platform
Mhm.
now. We've got one for jobs to be done in a vacation rental business. So there's one for each department to get started. So data's hard sometimes, and it's not for everybody. Like you said, some people get a twinkle in their eye, and
Find
some
the
people are just like, ugh, I
Find the
can't do it.
twinkle. Find the
Yes.
twinkle and use that person. Well, this
Yeah.
has been great. This was a beautiful episode. I really love all the information and how can you use data. So for all our attendees, appreciate you watching. We will have a blog that's going to have, some meat from this episode and sharing the video. If you ever have any questions for Hosteeva or for Key Data, I'm going to throw, our information in here for people to contact us. We clearly love to talk and we love to chit chat, and we love to know how can we do right and do better. for our industry of vacational people, that's what we care about. Let's just making memories and travel.
Yeah, agree, complete. Thank you so much for having me too and letting me blab about data for 30 minutes. So
I love it. This is great. Well, have a wonderful weekend. And if I don't talk to you, Merry Christmas.
thank you, everyone.
Bye.